The journey began in a quiet Filipino town where the sound of tricycles, children laughing, and church bells filled the air each morning. In the middle of this simple life lived a young boy with a second-hand guitar that his father repaired using scraps of wood and old strings. Music was his escape, his comfort, and his dream. Hotel California was the song he returned to every night, practicing under a dim bulb as the warm breeze carried the melody outside their small home. When America's Got Talent announced open auditions, the idea felt impossible. They didn't have much, but his family believed in him so fiercely that they sold baked goods, made small crafts, and gathered every coin they could to buy a ticket to the United States. The boy couldn't believe it when he finally stepped into the bustling Los Angeles airport. Everything felt larger than life, from the bright billboards to the endless highways. It was a world far from the narrow streets he grew up in. Backstage at AGT, surrounded by dancers, singers, and performers from all over the world, he felt incredibly small. His hands shook as he tuned his guitar again and again, his heart beating fast while producers rushed around calling contestants to the stage. When his name was called, he whispered a quick prayer, hugged his guitar tightly, and stepped into the bright, overwhelming world of stage lights and cameras. The judges looked at him with polite curiosity, a young boy from the Philippines with a shy voice and a guitar nearly as big as he was. The audience grew quiet, unsure what to expect from the kid who barely reached the microphone. He introduced himself softly, his accent warm and gentle, then took a deep breath. The moment he played the first chord, everything changed. The theater fell silent, mesmerized. The boy's voice carried a surprising richness, a depth far beyond his age, echoing through the massive auditorium. People who expected a nervous child suddenly leaned forward, stunned by the emotion pouring out of him. His version of Hotel California wasn't just a cover, it felt like a story he had lived, a melody shaped by sleepless nights of practice, hope, and sacrifice. Cameras zoomed in on Simon Cowell, who had started leaning closer, eyebrows raised in rare amazement. The boy continued singing with steady confidence, each note delivered with purity and grace. His fingers danced across the strings with a precision that left the crowd whispering in awe. When he reached the song's iconic high moments, the audience couldn't hold back anymore. They burst into cheers, applause echoing like waves, some people standing up without realizing it. Howie Mandel covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Heidi Klum smiled brightly, impressed by the maturity in his voice. Sofia Vergara clapped with excitement, turning to the others as if to say, "Can you believe this?" Even the production staff behind the cameras began shaking their heads with disbelief as the boy continued to pour out every bit of heart he had carried with him from home. As he strummed the final chord and let the last note float into the air, the entire theater erupted with a force that nearly made him jump. The applause crashed over him as he lowered his guitar, trembling and breathless. He had walked onto the AGT stage as an unknown boy from a tiny Filipino village, but in those moments, as thousands cheered and the judges stared in wonder, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he realized he might truly have the power to move the world with his voice. The crowd was still roaring when the boy looked up and noticed Simon Cowell slowly standing from his seat. At first, he didn't understand what was happening. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear the applause. He thought maybe Simon was about to give him feedback, or maybe he was going to point out something he did wrong. The boy swallowed hard, gripping his guitar tightly as the stadium lights warmed his face. Simon stared at him with a serious expression, the type that made contestants nervous, but something in his eyes felt different, almost proud. When Simon finally spoke, the boy felt the entire room fall into absolute silence. Simon told him that he didn't expect that kind of voice, that emotion, and that soul from someone so young and so quiet. The boy felt tears gathering at the corners of his eyes as Simon continued praising him, saying that performances like this were the reason the show existed. The audience started sensing what might be coming. People leaned forward in their chairs, some even whispered out loud, hoping they were right. The boy shook his head slightly, as if trying to protect himself from being disappointed. But then, Simon's expression softened, and he reached out his hand, hovering just above the golden buzzer. The boy gasped softly, the judges smiled, and the crowd began screaming even before Simon made contact. Time seemed to freeze as Simon pressed the button with a firm, powerful motion. Suddenly the arena exploded with blinding gold light. Confetti burst from above, raining down like a shimmering waterfall. The boy covered his mouth in shock as streams of gold drifted around him, catching in his hair, on his guitar, and on his shoulders. His family backstage erupted in joyful sobs, hugging each other tightly while watching their son achieve the impossible. Simon walked up to the stage as the boy tried to wipe tears from his cheeks, but the confetti kept falling faster than he could control his emotions. Simon told him that he was special, that he had something rare, and that from this moment on, his life was about to change. The other judges stood and applauded, cheering him on as the audience chanted his name. The boy stood in the center of the golden shower, overwhelmed beyond anything he had ever felt. For a few seconds, the world felt unreal, like he had stepped into someone else's dream. After that night, everything shifted. His performance spread across social media within hours, quickly reaching millions of views. People from all over the world reacted to his deep, powerful voice. Filipino communities everywhere celebrated him, proudly sharing the video with captions like, "We rise" and "Pinoy talent is world-class." News outlets wrote articles, radio stations replayed his audition, influencers reacted with emotion, and musicians praised his tone and authenticity. Overnight, he became the face of raw, unexpected talent, someone who reminded the world that greatness can come from the most humble places. But along with the fame came pressure. As the live rounds approached, his schedule filled with rehearsals, vocal coaching sessions, and interviews. Simon checked on him regularly, offering guidance about song choices, breathing technique, and connecting deeper with the audience. The boy appreciated the support, but some nights, he sat on his bed in the hotel room staring at the ceiling, wondering if he could truly handle it all. Despite the whirlwind around him, he never forgot where he came from. He remembered the tiny room where he practiced for hours, the warm Filipino breeze drifting through the window, and the dream that carried him across the ocean. As he stepped back onto the AGT stage weeks later for the next round, the crowd welcomed him with cheers as loud as a concert. The boy felt nervous, but he also felt something new growing in his chest: confidence. He wasn't just a contestant anymore. He was the golden buzzer act everyone was waiting to see. And as he took his place in the spotlight once again, he promised himself he would give everything he had. Not just for the judges, not for the cameras, but for his country, his family, and the people who believed in him long before the golden confetti ever fell. The next round arrived with a new level of pressure. The boy could feel it in the air as he walked into the rehearsal studio, surrounded by dancers stretching, singers warming up, and the familiar buzz of producers hustling around with headsets. Even though he had already earned the golden buzzer, he knew that proving himself again was more important than ever. He chose a song far more emotional and challenging, something that would push his voice and show the world that his talent wasn't a one-time miracle. In the quiet corner of the room, he practiced slowly, repeating lines again and again until each note carried the depth he wanted. Sometimes he paused, staring at the floor, thinking about home and the weight of representing his family and country on such a massive stage. When he stepped onto the AGT stage for his next performance, the lighting was dramatic, a single white spotlight centered on him, leaving everything else in darkness. The audience quieted almost instantly, waiting to see if the boy with the golden buzzer could rise even higher. He took a deep breath and began singing, his voice soft at first, delicate and emotional. The melody floated through the theater like a gentle wave, wrapping the audience in a moment they didn't expect. Then, as the song built, he pushed his voice further, allowing raw emotions to come through in every note. His voice cracked at all the right places, not because he was nervous, but because he was fully connected to the story he was telling. The judges leaned forward, mesmerized by the growth they were witnessing. As the final line left his lips, the auditorium erupted into applause. People stood up all at once, clapping, cheering, some even shouting his name. Howie told him he was made for this stage. Heidi said he had the soul of a true artist, and Sophia praised the way he told a story through his voice like someone far beyond his years. Simon nodded proudly, telling him that this performance proved he deserved the golden buzzer. The boy felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. He hadn't just performed, he had touched hearts, and he knew it. That night, social media blew up again, fans predicting that he would make it all the way to the finals. For the first time, he began to believe it too. As finals week approached, everything intensified. Days became packed with rehearsals, costume fittings, stage planning, and camera blocking. Reporters asked for interviews, online fans sent thousands of messages, and the pressure to deliver something unforgettable grew heavier each day. But in the middle of all the noise, he carried a quiet determination. He wanted his final performance to reflect who he truly was, not just as a singer, but as a Filipino boy with a dream that started long before the bright lights of AGT. With the help of the show's musical team, he created a special arrangement, classic rock infused with subtle Filipino elements, honoring both the music he loved and the roots that shaped him. On the night of the finals, the atmosphere backstage felt electric. When the boy finally walked out and faced the massive crowd, a mix of nerves and pride filled his chest. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing his parents, his hometown, and the journey that brought him here. Then the music started. His voice rose with more power than ever before, carrying strength, vulnerability, and authenticity all at once. The judges watched in stunned silence, absorbing every note. By the time he reached the climax, the audience was already on their feet. When the last note faded, the entire theater exploded into cheers louder than anything he had ever heard on the show. He didn't know yet whether he would win the season, but he didn't need to. Standing there on the grand stage, breathing hard under the spotlight, he realized he had already achieved something greater than a trophy. He had inspired millions, honored his family, and shown the world what a kid from a small Filipino town could do when given a chance. And as he walked off stage that night, he felt a deep peace, because he knew his journey in music had only just begun.